would you like to come on a cruise with me, Steve? it was like that, and I was like, oh yes, as a cruise would be great, Ron. Yeah, fantastic. You just look, you look back now and you cringe. You think, wow, how naive, how stupid were you? A couple of days later, the postman drops a big letter through the door. It's a big A4 like booklet inside an envelope. I opened it up, and it's a book of Hispanic cruises, and I'm like, oh my God, looking forward to the cruise on the letter. And I'm like, oh my, what am I playing at here? Seething at this point. And I went, it's okay. You just knocked me chair. He says, the bloke's a slag. He's a slag. Sutcliffe's a slag. And it turned out it was the Yorkshire Ripper. It was Peter Sutcliffe, the Yorkshire Ripper, who banged me chair. And, it wasn't long before the newspapers were screaming out that there'd been an attack by Ronnie Kray on Sutcliffe and Broadmoor. He basically, what he'd done was he demanded that I give him the bar takings at a charity event. He wanted the ticket money, and I refused on the ticket money. He says, well, get the bar takings. So we'd had numerous arguments. I'd slammed the phone down. My mindset by this stage was, he needs me more than I need him. It was a wake-up call and a realization you're dealing with somebody who's a serious person, and it could make things very difficult for you. But my relationship was never the same with Reg after that.
Hi everyone, you're very welcome to this week's episode of Parlay with Padre podcast. If you've not done so already, please like, subscribe and click the notifications bell so you don't miss any future videos and updates. This week, I'm delighted to be joined by true crime author and podcaster, producer, promoter, event organizer, avid Newcastle United fan, and when he has a bit of time, he also does a bit of acting as well.
Steve Wraith.
Steve, thanks a million for coming on the show this morning. It's great to have you here.
Cheers, mate. Thank you for getting us on. Delighted to be here. And I always laugh when people try to read me CV out because I spin a lot of plates, mate. But delighted to be on, and thanks for the invite.
Great to have you here. So before we start, we'll go to cheers and good health. Happy New Year to you, Steve.
Yep, cheers. Happy New Year, and Happy New Year to all your viewers and all your subscribers. Make sure you subscribe below. Great channel this. I've watched it for a while now, and it's always interesting to watch other shows and listen to other people's stories. And that's something we've learned a lot from the pandemic, I think, and well done, mate. Keep it going.
Cheers, man. I'm a big fan of your own channel as well. It's brilliant. Steve has written a number of books about the Krays, and that's what we're mainly going to be discussing today, his experiences with both Ronnie and Reggie. So, Steve, just before we start, I just wanted to maybe have a quick chat. What was it like growing up for you?
Yeah, I mean, I had a great childhood. I can't complain at all. I grew up in a place called Gateshead. I was born in South Shields, actually. So I'm actually a sand dancer. That's what you get called up here. I'm not a Geordie as such, although I've lived in Gateshead and all of my life and supported Newcastle for many years, as you already mentioned. But it was great. I had a poor start in education, not through any fault of my parents, but I went to a state school called the Drive Primary, which, back in those days, there was no such thing as Ofsted checking schools. And my parents realised after a 2-year period that I really wasn't learning anything. I was, unable to read and write properly. Maths was never my strong point, but I wasn't able to do basic maths. And they were a bit horrified as time progressed. So they moved me out of state school and moved me into private education. And as I was coming out of that school and going into the next, I suddenly realized, I'm now starting to learn. I can read, I can write, and I felt a lot more confident in the ability. I moved schools again. I went to a school in Sunderland, of all places, for the final years of my education. And to be honest, that school, although I didn't come away with many qualifications, it was the place where my life changed and went in a different direction. I was on course to probably fail everything at school. I was hitting 45% on most of my exam results. And my English teacher changed with 2 years to go. And the book curriculum at the time was pretty standard. You had to do a Shakespeare. You had a couple of basic books which everybody had to do. But you could then, with the first year of GCSE qualifications, you could pick a book of your own. And I'd picked up a book called Profession of Violence by John Pearson one Sunday morning when I was out on the quayside, where there used to be a famous market down there. And I picked up a copy of this book, 30 pence it was, orange cover, black and white photo of Ron and Reg Kray looking out at me. And I read that book within a couple of days. And my new English teacher, Peter Yates, basically said to me, he realised that I'd picked up a book and enjoyed it. And I actually read it twice in a couple of weeks. And he said, look, you could use that book as part of your GCSE coursework if you'd like to do that, So along with the Shakespeare book and along with Day the Triffids by John Wyndham and I think it was Brave New World by Aldous Huxley, I studied The Profession of Violence by John Pearson. And I'm pleased to say that in my GCSEs, I passed English with flying colours. I got a B and a C. Walked away with those 2 GCSEs. I passed geography as well, which I always find bizarre. I don't know whether that was just because I could find my way to school, but I passed geography as well. So I actually left with 3 GCSEs, major achievement. I was delighted. But the Kray's book was what changed the direction of my life, because having passed my English exam, I decided to write a letter to the 2 most notorious gangsters that the UK has ever had. And at that particular time, Ronnie Kray was in Broadmoor Hospital and Reggie Kray was in Gartree Prison. And the letter was quite simple. I wrote a letter to both of them and just said, thanks, for leading such an interesting life. I know it didn't turn out great for you. However, me reading this book and reading your story helped me pass my English exam. So I just wanted to share with you the fact that, your story inspired me to read the book, to stick in, and something good's come of it. And that was it. I just posted both the letters, first class stamp on, stuck an envelope in, hoping, a return envelope for a reply, because I thought, they might not have a great deal of cash inside, and I didn't know how it worked at the time. And I sat and waited for a reply.
Which came in a standardized template.
Yeah, it was correct. Reggie replied first, and it was a photo stat actually. And I've still got the letter to this day. In the corner was an advert for his book, which had just come out, called Our Story, I think it was. And it was just, dear Steve, thanks for the letter. This was written by him. Sadly, we cannot keep up a correspondence. Thanks for your support. God bless, Reg Kray. I found it easy to read the writing. And I think when you see the writing, it's easily obtainable on Google. Just Google Reg Kray letter and you'll see. It was very much like doctor's writing, doctor's prescription writing, very messy, very childlike, and almost illegible. But I found it very easy to read. Don't ask, I don't know why. But I was over the moon. This was like a treasured possession for me now, to have this letter off somebody notorious who I'd read about. And a couple of days later, another letter arrives, this time from Ronnie Kray. This one was typed, but the same again. Dear Steve, thanks for your support. Sadly, I cannot keep up a correspondence. God bless, Ron Kray. But it was signed by Ronnie Kray. So I had a letter from both the Kray twins. And for me, it was akin to getting something signed off Peter Beardsley, Kevin Keegan, Chris Waddle at the time, because as a young lad, that's who was on my wall. I had the usual posters of, half-naked women on there, which every pubescent, lad has. Some infamous posters, and then I had Peter Beardsley, Chris Waddle, Kevin Keegan, the stars of Newcastle United, and then alongside it, I had a photograph of that front cover of the book of the Krays, and now I had me 2 little letters, and that could have been the end of it. I could have thought, well, I'm happy with me lot. I've had 2 replies, and that's it. But something inside me decided that, it was worth pursuing. And it was a few months later when a copy of Take a Break magazine arrived in the house. And that was a woman's magazine that my mum had bought. And on the front page, on the front of the magazine, it had said, my dad is Reggie Kray, or something along those lines. So my mum had picked the magazine up, brought it back because of my interest with the Krays. And she said, oh, have a look at that. You might be interested. And inside there was a double page spread of a young lad called Brad Lane. And Brad lived with his mother, Kim, in Doncaster. And in this double page spread, young Brad, who at the time I think was 11 years of age, had a suit on. He had white shirt, tie, smart shoes, emblazoned headline, "My dad is Reggie Kray," picture of Reggie, and then a picture of some of the stuff they had at this house. And I was like, it's like a Kray museum. And again, the interest, the fascination, the obsession, whatever you want to call it, from me was there. I was like, God, I wish I was that kid. I wish I had all this stuff to go and rummage around and have a look in. And I never thought anything of it other than I might drop him and his mum a line. So, I sat down, I wrote a letter, I posted it off. It said that they lived in a place called Dunscroft in Doncaster, which was South Yorkshire. Didn't have a street address, of course. They wouldn't put that in the magazine, but I just wrote a 2-page letter telling them that I'd had contact with Reg and Ron and that I was fascinated, and that was it. And I didn't get a reply back for a while. And I, to be honest, I put it at the back of my mind, never thought anything of it. And then out of the blue, a reply arrived, and it was a nice reply written by Kim to say, thanks very much for your interest. And she put a couple of photostats of photographs I hadn't seen of the twins. So basically said that they were looking to do some memorabilia and merchandise, and this was their plans. And if I was ever in Doncaster, to give them a shout. And she put the phone number in. So, we exchanged a couple of letters. I spoke to them on the phone, and at that time, I'd just started a couple of things. I'd started making T-shirts with my mate who he was looking to make a few quid when he left school. So he was printing T-shirts. So I came up with the designs. And at the time, we were doing Peter Beardsley, Chris Waddle, Kevin Keegan, Gaza was starting to come into the first team. We're doing these T-shirts, and we're making a little bit of pocket money out of them, and selling them outside the ground, or selling them selling them through like a record shop called Pet Sounds in Newcastle. And I'd also started a football fanzine called The Mighty Quinn, which was based on Mickey Quinn, who was at that time, Newcastle United centre forward. It was just any way that I could of making an earner. But the guy who I'd started the fanzine with was a guy called Steve Cross. Now, Steve was based in Scunthorpe, which isn't too far from Doncaster. And on one summer, I decided to go down there and spend a couple of days with Steve. And on the off chance, I decided to ring Brad and Kim to see if they were around, because I felt I could probably pop over to see them for a couple of hours as part of my trip down to that part of the world. And they were welcoming. They said, yeah, please come over. We said, anytime you're here. So I jumped on the train from Scunthorpe to Doncaster, and I arrived in Doncaster. I was met at the station by Brad and Kim, and they took us in their car to the house. And that is where things really started to take off with the relationship with the Krays. Brad was, showing me all of this stuff. At the time, they had Francis' engagement ring. They had some of Reg's suits hanging up in the wardrobe from the 1960s. They had the wedding photographs, which David Bailey had taken. That he had countless letters, and it was just like a treasure trove of Kray memorabilia. I wish I could go back in time now, knowing what I know now, and see exactly what they had. And but it was fascinating to see. But the key thing that happened that day was the phone rang. Just before I left, and it was Reg Kray. He was ringing Brad, and Brad had run straight to the phone. He picked the phone up and he was like, Dad, hi, how are you? Reg was having a chat with him, and then he went on to speak to Kim, and then Kim said, Steve, Reg would like to have a word with you. And I picked the phone up, and I was, hello, and on the end of the phone was this, quite a low speaking Cockney voice, and it was like, hello, is that Steve Wraith? Yeah, it's me, Reg Kray. And that was it. It was like, wow, I'm speaking to this guy who I've read about, and I've got to say, I idolized at that particular time, without thinking about the crimes that he committed. I was just blown away with this particular guy. And that was it. I spoke to him, and we chatted briefly about me, about what I did in football. And he finished the call off by saying, you'll have to come down and see me in prison. And 2 weeks later, that's exactly where we were. You know, we're heading down to Gartree prison and, you know, going to visit Reggie Kray.
You just reminded me of a very good saying we have here in Ireland about a dumb priest never gets a parish.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. You have to reach out, and just the worst I can say is no, like, you know, and I think it's a philosophy that I think we both have, you know, a dumb priest never got a parish.
Yeah, 100%, mate. And then that was, you know, that really was a mind-blowing experience, because, you know, to speak to somebody like that on the phone who you've read a book about is, you know, at such a young age, it's crazy. And I got, you know, I went back, I finished my holiday with Steve down in Scunthorpe. I went home, I told my parents what had happened. My dad wasn't happy at all. My mum was very supportive. And, you know, subsequently, my mum's spoken on a couple of documentaries about this, but she just said, you know, if you'd told our Stephen not to do something, you would have just done it. So, you know, it was better being supportive and having your back and knowing exactly what you were doing. And that was the way that my mum chose to deal with the situation. And, you know, the visit itself, you know, took place a couple of weeks later. It was always hard to go and visit a prison, you know, but it wasn't as strict as it was these days. Although Reg was he was in Market Harbour at Gartree prison. It was category A. I'd never visited a prison before, but I still had to submit forms. I had to be put on the visiting order, the VO. And I just remember, you know, it was a hell of a trip to go to from Newcastle. But I got the train to Doncaster, then they picked me up and then they drove me down. So it was a long day, and then I went back on the same day. But getting down there was, you know, getting to the prison and just seeing this big foreboding building, that, you know, the high walls with the barbed wire on top, and then going through these security doors and then going through all the relative checks, something I'd never done before. And I wasn't scared, but I was in awe, really. And I think it was at that age, it was a bit of a wake-up call that you should never go down this path. You know, you never want to go down this path and be the person on the other side of the wall. I remember walking in after we'd been searched and gone through all the protocol, getting into the main visiting room, and it was a summer's day, and it was the noise that greeted us, because there was a lot of activity. Lots of the visits had already started. There was kids screaming and shouting and running around, and you know, the prison officers who were in the room on different levels so they could oversee the room. And I remember just walking to the middle of the room and walking to this table, which was our allocated table. And, you know, basically sitting down and waiting. And there was, you know, 3 chairs on one side of the table, 1 on the other side. And we were just waiting for the arrival of Reggie Kray. And then a door opened at the far end of the room. And I just saw this big prison officer come through, white shirt, black pants, keys. And then I saw this guy, it was a lot smaller than him, with a blue and white prison shirt, unbuttoned down to the navel, with a cross like down on his chest, silver cross, pair of blue jeans and a pair of Reebok trainers, and just walking up to the table, and grey-haired, glasses. It was Reggie Kray. And at this point in time, he just won he just beaten the bench press record in the prison. I think he was around about 56, 57-year-old at the time, and he was physically fit. So he picked Brad up, he'd give him a cuddle, rubbed his hair like a dad would, and give Kim a kiss. And then he came to me and he went, "You must be Steve from Newcastle." And he shook my hand, and we had a 2-hour visit. I can't remember too much about it other than what we discussed. You know, the situation was, again, you know, he was discussing football. I was a Newcastle fan. He was an Arsenal fan. So we talked a little bit about that. He told us that he played football that week. He'd been playing football in the prison. We talked a bit about my job, which at the time was working within the family business at the post office. But then we spoke a little bit about T-shirts, and I'd mentioned the idea about T-shirts, and it triggered something in his mind. And then he started pulling out scraps of paper. He's throwing them on the table, and this, as I would learn over the next 10 years, was part of the course with Reg. He would write things on scraps of paper, pull them out of his top pocket, put them on the table, and he'd have ideas, and he'd have jobs, and he'd have things that he'd want to do. And it was mind blowing. I mean, I'd gone down in a suit that day as well. I wanted to show respect. I think he appreciated that. I had a suit, some smart shoes, a white shirt, a tie. Back in those days, I had a bit of hair as well. But I'd actually, made the effort, and I think he appreciated that. And we shook hands and we just said, we'll keep in touch. And again, that was fascinating. And before I left, he said, you need to go and see Ron now. And that, of course, was a completely different journey altogether,
There was a time where Reggie tried to set yourself and Kim up.
Yeah, that was bizarre. That was bizarre, to be fair. I've still got this legal document. I've never had it looked at by a solicitor, but in a nutshell, he'd actually wanted me to become Brad's dad on the outside. Bearing in mind this stage, I'm 18 years of age and, got my whole life ahead of us. And one of Britain's most notorious gangsters is asking me to become some kind of surrogate father to Brad, because he's of the opinion he's never going to get out of prison. So he's wanting me to do this and become an official guardian. And Kim, I think, quite liked the idea. At one point, I'm guessing. Suggesting that I move in with Kim and create this surrogate family because Brad needs a dad. And I was like, it's not for me, it's not for me. But yeah, this was the kind of madcap thing that would get suggested or put forward on the odd occasion from not just Reg, but Ron as well. And there was no concept of you having a life. They only saw you having a life that revolved around them. They didn't see you having a life, outside of prison. And, they didn't have any concept of time or distance. So, for example, if, I was in Newcastle and Brad was acting up, which occasionally he did as a youngster, Reg would want me to go around and see him and have a word with him. And I said, you do realize that I'm like an hour and a half away on a train. I'm 150 miles, away from Brad. I can't just, instantly go around and pop to his house in Dunscroft, and there was no understanding of that, or, just crazy, mate, crazy. And, the relationship with Brad and Kim was great at the start, but after I'd visited Ron, and the visit to Ron was completely different because he was in Broadmoor Hospital. And Broadmoor Hospital is exactly what it says. It's a hospital. It's not a prison. Although he is locked up, he doesn't have his own keys to his door. He has a lot more of an easier regime in there, Ron, at the time. And we get down there, we go through the same protocol. We have to be VO'd. We have to have it, we have to go in. We have to be passed by the doctor to go and see him. But then when you walk into Broadmoor at that time, it's like an old Victorian madhouse. There wasn't very, it was just beginning to get modernized when I was visiting it. And you walked in to this reception area, you would leave your stuff in the lockers, and then if you had anything to hand in, which at the time we did, you always had to take Ron some John Player specials, usually 200 John Player specials. You'd leave them at the reception so Ron could get them, and then you'd go in and you'd be walked through the courtyard and then walked into the main ward. So you would walk through the ward of the hospital, and you pick up on it quite quickly, but you're walking past the rooms where the patients are actually kept. So, there was Taunton Ward, for example, or there was Somerset Ward. Those were the two wards that Ron used to be on. And, it was only by, as you're walking down, you're seeing the names on the door and you're thinking, wow, this is actually where these people are actually staying, sleeping, living, Anyway, you walked down this corridor. My mum had prepared me because she'd worked in the mental health sector for a while. She'd worked in mental institutions in the Northeast, and she said there would be pastel pale colours to keep the people who were there, the patients, calm and colours. So anyway, we walked into this room on the left-hand side, and as we walk in, there's this big stage, big red flock curtains. At the far end of the room, there's like a conservatory which opens up into the gardens. It was again a summer's day, so the doors were open into the gardens, and again quite busy, quite noisy. And we sat down again on the middle table, and the middle table is significant. The Krays always like to sit in the middle of the room, so there could be kings of all this like surveyed. And now look, you could see that they could make a grand entrance as well, and they were never on time. They always hung back, so they'd make a grand entrance when everyone came in. So yeah, we're sitting there, we're waiting, and there aren't prison officers in there. They're nurses, so there's nurses who were on hand to to help you if you need it and to bring you refreshments. So anyway, the visit's well underway, about 10-15 minutes in, and then this guy appears in the doorway by himself, not with a nurse. Lovely, Savile Row suit on, blue, white pinstriped, silk tie, gold tie pin, Gucci shoes, hair, grey, black hair, bit of grey in it, slicked back, gold horn rimmed glasses, a pinky ring on his finger, white handkerchief in his top pocket, and he walks straight in. He stops, looks, and then walks straight over. And this is Ronnie Kray. And he sits, again, greets Brad, greets him, and then greets me, and shakes my hand. You must be Steve, and that was it. The visit began, and it was surreal because he's living the life of a gangster inside. He's still stuck in a time warp in the 1960s. I caught a glimpse of his shirt. It had RK embroidered into it. And you're thinking, wow, this is weird, He started chain smoking John Player specials on the visit, creating that atmosphere, which he used to do in the 60s. If you read the books, he used to chain smoke, and he loved the smoke filling the room, the bar room where he was in. And that's what he was doing. And he probably went through, anything between 40 and 60 cigarettes on an hour and a half, 2 hour visit. He clicked his fingers. He couldn't light a cigarette himself. He wasn't allowed to light it, so the nurses would come over and light his cigarette. He clicked his fingers
kept busy,
again.
So they were kept busy that hour and a half.
Yeah, and he clicked his fingers again, and another nurse would come over and say, "Do you want any refreshments?" And he would drink Caliber Lager. Now Caliber Lager is non-alcoholic, and he'd be sitting with these cans, and it turned out that he used to order 6 cans of Caliber Lager, and you think, well, why order 6 cans? But the medication that he was taking, along with the Caliber Lager, he actually got a buzz off it. So he actually got a little bit tipsy drinking Caliber Lager because of the medication he was taking. But it was different. It was surreal. It was a weird time in my life, I guess, inspirational in a lot of ways. But to go and meet somebody like that, and again, it's down to the fact that it's somebody who you've read about, you studied, and you passed your exam on. I was just blown away, and I'd separated in my mind. I've worked this out now. I'm 50 this year, but I've worked out now that as a youngster, I'd picked the best bits out of that book, and I'd taken away the gangsterism, I'd taken away the crime, I'd taken away the violence, the murder, and I'd parked that at the back of my mind. What I'd taken out of it was sharp dressers, polite manners, morals, involved in boxing, which is one of my favorite sports, involved in nightclubs, which is something which, as a young man, I experienced. I ended up doing door security for 18 years. Involved with celebrities and photograph with celebrities. And, that's what I ended up doing as a promoter, working with top names and celebrities and getting me photographed with them and meeting them and getting to know them myself. I'd taken all of the stuff that they wanted. Reg, having Frances as a wife, and having a great woman on your arm and building a family. All of those things that the Krays had done, I wanted to do. And I took that from the book subconsciously. And that's ultimately what I ended up becoming. But without any of the crime, without any of the violence, not doing any of the bad stuff. Or prison. Yeah, I took on that way. And I still had all my life ahead of us at this point. But, at the time, I just didn't realize that this was going to be my journey. And that visit to Ron was fascinating. I walked away, and I've published a photograph of me there. It's captured in time now. Me standing there with Brad and me with Kim. And the relationship.
What was Ronnie like?
Ronnie was great. I mean, he, again, very, very like Reg. Spoke a lot like this and used to say, good. And, he'd take a draw on his cigarette and go, what do you do, Steve? Do you work in a post office or something? I think that's right. And I'll be going, yeah, that's what I do. And he goes, good. And it was weird, but they both spoke very low and in that kind of way. His first thing that he said to us, and again, I've spoken about this on other shows and other podcasts and put it in my books, but the very first thing he said to us, he put his hand on my knee and he goes, he leant right in and he goes, you don't mind that I'm bisexual, do you, Steve? And I went, no, I says, as long as you've got no designs on me, Ron, And he goes, no, good. And he started talking as well on that day about a cruise. And again, I was a bit naive in those days, and certainly not up to date on what any of this terminology was with regards to homosexual activity, shall we say. But he basically talking about a cruise, and would you like to come on a cruise with me, Steve? And it was like that, and I was like, oh yes, as a cruise would be great, Ron. Yeah, fantastic. You just look, you look back now and you cringe. You think, wow, how naive, how stupid were you? But I was a young lad and I didn't understand the gay connotation to it. But anyway, I get home and a couple of days later, the postman drops a big letter through the door. My mum shouts up the stairs, Steve, the letter for you. Think it's from one of them. So I come down the stairs, get this bloody letter, and it's a big A4 booklet inside an envelope. Ron Kray's familiar scroll on the front. I opened it up, and it's a book of Hispanic cruises, and I'm like, oh my God, looking forward to the cruise on the letter, and I'm like, oh my, what am I playing at here? But yeah, I can laugh about it now. I'm pleased to say Ron never got out, and I never had to have that situation where I said, actually, Ron, I'm busy washing my hair that weekend. But it's, you look back and you think it's bizarre. I think the most, the most bizarre visit I had was a one where, the relationship with Brad and Kim soured. They got jealous of my relationship with the Krays, because obviously I told you that the t-shirt idea had already been mentioned to Reg. I took that the next step, and I suggested to Reg that we do the t-shirts. I said, I'd love to do the t-shirts. Would you be interested? I could put an image of the Krays on the front. And he goes, yeah, that would be great. Send us like a copy of one. Let's see what you can. And, so I pinged one into the prison at the time. They were happy to pass it on. He loved the idea. He spoke to Ron on a regular basis. He also wrote to him, and he used to have 2 visits a year to each other. One where Ron would go to prison, the other where Reg would go to Broadmoor. But they spoke about it and they said it's a great idea. So I went into business with the Krays over these t-shirts, me and my pal. They wanted 70%. We could keep 30%, but we had to put the money in. The t-shirts sold like hotcakes. We sold them in a shop in Newcastle, then a place in Middlesbrough ordered, then a place in Sunderland ordered, and then we ended up branching out. And that meant that the visits became more frequent. I was visiting Reg once a month in those days, which was possible. I was on his VO list, and I got to see Ron on a lot of occasions as well. But on this one particular visit, I went to see Ron. Again, went through the protocol. I went on my own. It was a hell of a journey, because I had to go down to King's Cross from Newcastle, which in those days took about 4.5 hours. I then had to get a train from King's Cross to Reading. Then I had to go from Reading to Berkshire, to where the hospital was. And an all-round trip of seven, just best part of 17 hours a day, as well as the visits, so hardly any sleep and just ridiculous amount of traveling. But I got to the Broadmoor, I went through, got into the room. Ron came, clicked his fingers, got his cigarettes, we got with refreshment. And he says, are you hungry, Steve? And I went, well, I says, I am actually. I said, I didn't have anything to eat on the tray. And he says, I'll get you something. So he clicks his fingers, the nurse comes over, takes me order, and I ordered a burger and chips. And as I ordered the burger and chips, it comes over and I'm biting into it and finish it. We have a really good visit. And he goes, did you enjoy that burger then, Steve? I went, yeah. He says, yeah, he's a good chef, Graham. I went, oh, Graham. I said, who's that? He goes, yeah, Graham Young. He's a patient here. And I was like, I think he's in for poisoning. And he said it with a deadpan face. And I'm thinking, in for poisoning. So, and I'm one of these people, if somebody says something, I'm like, feeling a bit iffy on the train going back.
Yeah, I was going to the back from there quickly,
Yeah, exactly. But after that, it turned out Graham Young had actually been dead for a couple of years. But this was just Ron's wicked sense of humour. On another visit, I saw the flip side to him, and I saw the side which I think a lot of people probably saw in the 60s, which was Ron being violently angry. And I was again sitting in the visiting room, and as the visit started, somebody came in behind me and I didn't see them, and they knocked my chair. And like everybody does, somebody knocks your chair if you're in a restaurant or a bar. quickly turned like that, you know, and Ron obviously saw me react to what had happened, and he just started swearing. He was going red in the face, and the guy behind us, you know, he had jet black hair, you know, quite a big mop of hair, a beard, big black beard like I've got today, and he was sitting talking to an old woman. Didn't flicker at Ron going mad, and he's, you know, seething at this point. And I went, it's okay, you just knocked me chair. He says, the bloke's a slag, he's a slag, Sutcliffe's a slag. And it turned out it was the Yorkshire Ripper. It was Peter Sutcliffe, the Yorkshire Ripper, who banged me chair. And, you know, it wasn't long before the newspapers were screaming out that there'd been an attack by Ronnie Kray on Sutcliffe in Broadmoor. It was a third party who'd done it. It was a guy called Lee Cianada, who was the Woolworths killer, who had basically thought he was Ronnie Kray. And I think what had happened was, I think Ron had, after that visit, had decided to, you know, he'd slighted one of his visitors, and he decided to get somebody to take a vengeance on him, and that's what happened. But it was quite a scary situation to be in, to see Ronnie go to that extreme. You know, and you can see why, you know, he was never let out in a lot of ways, you know.
I think I get the impression from reading, and I'm going to put the link for your book. It's an excellent book, The Krays, The Final Years. It kind of details how you became such a close associate of them and how you built relationships with them and the various projects you worked on together. But I kind of get the impression from reading that you probably had more of a soft spot for Ronnie than Reggie. Would that be fair to say?
100%, mate, because, you know, Reg and I did business together. Ron didn't really get involved in the business side. And, you know, when you went to see Ron, he was always keen on listening to what you've been doing. He wanted to know what kind of week you'd had or what was going on the outside. Wanted to talk about boxing because that was his favourite sport. What you thought about this fight, what you thought about that fight. You know, Mike Tyson was prevalent in those days, and he was always interested in what he was up to. But just outside stories, and occasionally we talk about the past. Whereas Reg was very set in his ways, and depending on what had happened that week or what was going on within his personal life with people on the outside, really depended on whether you had a good visit. And as Reg went down the prison system, because he moved from category A to category B, I visited him in numerous prisons, and there would be some places, Maidstone, for example, and Nottingham. He manipulated the prison system by getting visiting orders for different prisoners who weren't having a visit on that day. And what the prison authorities were allowing him to do was actually put tables together. So on some occasions you would go in and you might find yourself on a table with six other people who you don't know, but Reg just combined other people's VOs and used them on his visit. I mean, there was one crazy situation where we all went into Maidstone. There was me, Dave Courtney, Frankie Fraser, Charlie Richardson, Christian Simpson, Dave Courtney. We're all sitting on the same table and talking about the old days. And it was a fascinating gangland getting together to be involved in and be at. But in the grand scheme of things, again, you know, it should never have happened. You should never have been allowed to have all those tables together. But this is what the prison authorities allowed. I think a lot of the screws felt sorry for Reg because, you know, nobody had ever been kept in past the tariff, if you like. I mean, you know, in the grand scheme of things, a lot of people are given a 20-year sentence. They're out after 10. And they're out on a license, but they're out. But the Krays were very much like political prisoners because of the crimes they committed. The Richardsons were given similar sentences, yet, you know, they were let out to live their lives. And I think it was simply down to the fact that the Krays had got so involved with the bureaucracy and the politics and the politicians that they were never going to be allowed out because of the stories that could tell. And you know, I think the prison authority sympathised with them massively, and that's why they were given this opportunity. But there was other occasions where in Nottingham prison, you would go on a visit, and I went on visits with Maureen Flanagan, you know, with other people, and you could find yourself sitting there for 20 minutes of the visit by yourself because Reg would get up and go off and speak to people. He was very much like a celebrity. People in the prison would be like, you know, oh, there's Reg, and he'd go up and speak to people and shake people's hands, and he'd be rubbing the kids' heads. And, you know, he was very much, you know, a sought after figure in the visiting room, and people just wanted to speak to him and shake his hand. And that's that's what happened. He became a celebrity within the prison walls,
I'm sure he had the McVitie's biscuits out for that meeting with all the
To be honest, that was a joke that Frank Fraser cracked on the visit, and I think he went to the press with that story. And cups of tea and biscuits, and let's open the McVitie's was one of those lines I think that Frankie delivered. He was always one for a quick, mad Frankie Fraser. But that was a piece of gangland history. It put to bed the feud that had gone on since the 60s. Between the Krays and the Richardsons, and subsequently when Ron and Reg died, and Charlie, of course, the Richardsons attended the funerals.
Just to explain that for people who aren't Kray experts, basically Reg was in prison for killing Jack the Hat McVitie. So just to clear that up or explain that in case you think we're promoting McVitie's, I don't have a sponsorship deal with them yet. One other person you saw in the visiting room with Reggie Kray was a very famous Irish prisoner at the time, Paddy Joe Hill, who just being released after the Birmingham 6 case. He was finally acquitted. Can you maybe just explain what happened that day when you saw him?
Yeah, I mean, I'd been sitting at home, like everybody else, watching the amazing developments of this, this justice case being looked over, and subsequently these innocent men being released. And I just remember that infamous day of them coming out of court. And, I remember seeing Paddy Hill with his hands up like that and, over the moon, delighted into the arms of his family. And, because they'd had so much national coverage, of course I knew who this guy was. And I was sitting on this visit, and, it was a couple of days after he'd been released, and I was sitting with Reg talking, and then I was just aware of this person coming up on my left-hand side and going, Reg, can I just say, just want to wish you all the best, and I hope you're next. And it was Paddy Hill, and he shook Reg's hand, and then he was introduced to us on the table. And I was, again, it was just like, wow, I recognize this guy. And it was probably about 10 years later that I bumped into Paddy again. I was invited to Charlie, it was Charlie Bronson at the time, Charlie Salvador now. I was invited to Charlie Bronson's wedding to a young Indian lady called Saria. And Paddy was one of the guests. And on that day, Paddy actually came up to me and he went, "You're that Geordie fella, aren't you?" He says, "It was in prison that day when I seen Reggie Kray." And we got on well. We had a great chat that day. It was great to see, him, still on the out and still making a success of things. And he's gone on to do some fantastic things since he was released from prison. But yeah, another infamous character who I met behind bars.
Yeah, he was saying that he always mentioned he'd love to visit Ireland. It was his dream to come to Ireland, to different places. And his wife, Frances, she was Frances Shea. So it says she had Irish blood in her as well, or maybe she came from a London Irish family.
Yes, I mean, Frances was his one true love. And I mean, I had a couple of conversations with Reg on visits where he would, speak fondly of Frances. It was something which really tormented him. I would say that her ghost probably tormented him throughout his sentence behind bars. When he had periods of reflection, and most of the books that Reg wrote when he was behind bars were dedicated in some way, shape or form to her. We saw the emotion that was on Reg's face when he was released for Ronnie Kray's funeral, and released for his mother's funeral, of course, and released for his brother's funeral, Charlie. These particular images of him bent over and kissing the gravestone. They're not mocked. They're not. That was an outpouring of grief and an outpouring of emotion, and it was his biggest regret. That it really was. And I think the film legend really does it a disservice. He never consummated the marriage. We know that. He certainly didn't rape her, as was pointed to in that film. Yeah. He never raped her and he never hit her. And I always find that really hard to watch. That that something that was written in a book by John Pearson, the late great John Pearson. It has to be said, he's just passed away the back end of last year. But yeah, I just found that bizarre that would even be included, because it just gives a complete false narrative of the story. He loved Frances. He would have done anything for her. But for Reg, he was a closet homosexual. He was an identical twin with Ronnie Kray. Ronnie was very open about his sexuality. Reg was a closet, and not only did he have to deal with a mentally ill brother, but he had to deal, with battling with his sexuality throughout time. And, that's the nuts and bolts of it. That is why, Reg was so heavy on, heavily dependent on uppers and downers, as they called them back in the day, drugs and alcohol. And it was just a vicious circle for Reggie Kray, which was never going to end well,
Yeah. The mood swings of Raleigh and Reggie, I'd say, must have been quite difficult for you to deal with. And there's been a number of times in the book where you say that they'd order something to be done that would be completely unreasonable, but you knew they didn't mean it, that the next time you'd met them, it wouldn't even be mentioned. They must have been very difficult you wasted a lot of time doing projects for them.
I've looked back on some of the letters back in the day that I had between us, and sometimes phone calls, which came, and the daftest situation I ended up in with Ron was when Kate Kray, who was somebody who we married behind bars, had written a book about him. They'd written a book together, but then she wrote a book about him, and unfortunately, she made something public. Which he didn't really want to be made public, which was that, he had agreed that she could have sexual relations outside of prison during wedlock, which is something he wanted to keep personal, but she publicized. And he was not very happy about that. And on this particular visit, he gave me a list. I've still got the list to this day, and it was a list of things. And at the top of the list was Kate Kray. And I went through the list with Ron, and I very rarely got a list off Ron, but this particular list said Kay Kray at the top. The next one was Dominic Anciano, which was the director of the Krays film. And there was a couple of other names on the list. And I said, so what's this? And he goes, I want you to get rid of Kate. And I was like, sorry? Yeah, I want you to get rid of her. Wow. I was like,
yeah.
What does that mean? What does that mean? So, and Dominic Anciano, so I moved quickly on to Dominic Anciano, and, after that, it was, we moved on. But that was a very serious mention of Kay Kray and what he wanted me to do. And I just, by the time the next letter came, by the time the next phone call came, by the time the next visit came, it was never mentioned again. But that was quite scary, and that was quite eerie. With Reg, we fell out on numerous occasions. As I got older, I started to realize what I'd got myself into. And that sounds bizarre, but because things became more bizarre, the T-shirts, for example, gives you a good, clear example of what the Krays were like. I got into a great business venture with them. But then when I tried to get these T-shirts into London, I found a bit of opposition, and people said, oh, we already get our T-shirts off somebody else. And there was no internet in those days. So it was good old fashioned, phone calls and, trying to find out who was selling these T-shirts. I eventually got the phone number for antique shop in Croydon. And I was told that the guy who sold the T-shirts down there was in on a Wednesday afternoon. So I made a phone call on the Wednesday afternoon, and this gravelly old voice picks the phone up and he goes, hello. And I was like, it's Steve Wraith from Newcastle. I work for Reggie Kray, and I've been doing these T-shirts, and I wanted to put these T-shirts in down there. And he goes, can I stop you there? Can I stop you there? And I says, yeah. He says, I'm Charlie Kray. And that was the first time I'd ever spoken to Charlie Kray, the elder brother, 7 years older. And it turns out he was doing T-shirts. So I had to go back to the Twins and tell them what the situation was. We can't get the T-shirts into London because your brother's doing it. And they never spoke to him for a year. And I've got letters where they're calling him Mr. X. They wouldn't even call him Kray in the letters. Like kids were calling him Mr. X. Have you heard anything from Mr. X? And it turns out, again, you speak to people like Maureen Flanagan, who was the Krays hairdresser back in the 60s. She had exactly the same situation. They would fall out religiously with Charlie, and they would then call him Mr. X, and then he would get back in the good books eventually. But that was crazy. I had a situation as well.
No pun intended, like.
No pun intended, exactly. But they had, there was other things. A couple of occasions I put the phone down on Reg. One particular situation was they'd started to do the Kray parties again, and back in the 60s. The Krays loved a bash. They loved a party. They loved to raise money for charity. They loved to raise money for people who were in prison, but they loved to raise money for themselves. And in the 90s, they came up with this concept. There was a woman called Steph King in Nottingham who by this time had started to manage the situation. She took on where I'd started with the T-shirts. She started a fan club. She started to do the petition. She started to do other things. And I'd started to realize that I was simply a small cog in a big wheel. I wasn't the main business advisor here. I was one of many business advisors. Somebody who had their ear, somebody who visited them, somebody who was making the money. But it turned out there was a network of us up and down the country who Reg and Ron were playing off against each other and using. Steph King was the first person who really came along and molded things and got things together and started organizing things. And she had the age, she had the experience. I went to her house a couple of times. I've still never met her to this day, and she's still alive, and we've exchanged messages, but still never met her. You would go to her house and she would leave a box outside her house. You couldn't see who she was. Really mysterious woman. However, she was very good friends with Reg, and she did a lot of work for him. But yeah, we ended up in this bizarre situation where we were putting events on, and you know, she organised a couple in London. I organised a couple in London. Then I said I wanted to do one in Newcastle. Now, a lot of the money would go to charity. Paul Stapleton was a young disabled guy. James Fallon, another one who money was raised for. I had a young guy in Newcastle called Terry Moran who had been at a bonfire display, had a shell suit on, and who basically was playing with paint thinners. There was a spark. The shell suit went up in flames and he got 80% burns. And he was a promising young footballer. He would have gone on to play for Newcastle. There's no doubt about that. So I decided to do a charity event in Newcastle. I asked Reg to back it and support me, and he said he would. So we sent a tape out with a message to Terry, which we played on the night. I got some celebrities from Newcastle to come along. I charged £10 a ticket. We sold 300 tickets. We made £3,000. We paid for the buffet. We got the venue for free. We gave £2,600 to the charity. No drama. Great night, a lot of plaudits from everybody. Charlie Kray came up with Tony Lambrianou to host the night. Absolutely fantastic a night that people always remember in Newcastle for the right reasons. I decided to do another one 6 months later for the same cause because the money had gone a long way, but it hadn't solved all of the family's problems, and I wanted to do another one. And this is where my problem started, because Reg started to crank the pressure up on me, and he started to say, well, I want something out of this one. And I said, well, I want to donate all the money to charity. Well, you can't. I want something out of this one. And we toed and froed and backwards and forwards, and we had arguments. And my main concern was my own reputation, because what I didn't want to do was end up in a situation where money went missing or money, got taken out, and I was to blame because Reggie Kray is in prison. It's not going to affect him, but it could affect me and my standing in the local community with my people. And I decided that I would record a phone call. Now, technology wasn't what it is now. So what I did was I got a good old-fashioned plug-in mic, which you would sing karaoke on or do an announcement on stage on. And I sellotaped it to the downstairs phone. And I plugged it into my dad's hi-fi with an old tape deck, pressed record and put it on pause. And then I waited for the phone to ring because I knew Reg was going to ring this night. We'd arranged a phone call at 6 o'clock that night. I got my girlfriend at the time, Andrea, to answer the phone upstairs and then pick the receiver up downstairs and then press pause and record the phone call. And the phone calls, I haven't put it on YouTube yet. I might put it on YouTube. I've always, we sell it on, I sell it as the Kray tapes, but I might just put it on YouTube so everybody can hear it. But it's a fascinating insight into the manipulation of Reggie Kray. And you can hear this conversation with me and him. And he basically, what he done was he demanded that I give him the bar takings.
At a charity event.
At a charity event. He wanted the ticket money and I refused on the ticket money. He says, well, get the bar taken. So we'd had numerous arguments. I'd slammed the phone down. My mindset by this stage was he needs me more than I need him. And I don't need him, He told us Charlie Kray couldn't come and he would ban Charlie from coming to the event. It was a wake-up call and a realization you're dealing with somebody who's a serious person, and it could make things very difficult for you. But that phone call captures that perfectly. And what happened was Charlie didn't come to the event. Tony Lambrianou still came. We did the event. We raised £2,100 for charity. But my relationship was never the same with Reg. After that, we still communicated. I still visited, although not as often. But we were pulled back together in 95 when Ronnie Kray died, because Ronnie passed away in 95. And from my perspective, I was invited down by Dave Courtney, who I'd got to know, on visits as part of the security team. By this time, I'd gone into the security industry. I was a doorman in Newcastle. I was a head doorman. And I got asked to look after Charlie Kray at the funeral. I was his minder at the funeral. I'd been asked to go and look after Ron's body in the build-up of the funeral, but I couldn't make it for whatever reason. But I'd said yes to the security side of things, and that briefly brought us back together in a particular way. We became friends again, and we tossed a few ideas around, and there was numerous things that would get put to him. The big one was a guy who the name rang a bell, but he was asking Reg if he could invest £50,000 into a nightclub idea called School Dinners in London. And for some reason, this name rang a bell. I didn't know why, but it did. And Reg was saying, I've got somebody who can invest the money in this. I'll get a percentage, and we can do the door. We can have the security, blah, 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 blah. And I was like, I said, there's something about this guy's name, and I don't trust it. I said, let me do some research. And I had an instinct that it was in one of my crime books. So I was literally flicking through crime books indexes, looking for this name. And sure enough, the name came up, and it was a name in the back of Ronnie Biggs' book. And it was the guy who tried to kidnap Ronnie Biggs and bring him home for ransom. Was the guy who was trying to set up this nightclub. And I said to Reg, I said, I wouldn't get involved. You might give him 50 grand and you'll never see it again. I says, I might be completely wrong. I says, but I just wouldn't get involved. So there was loads of those kinds of things. You had people wanting to use their name. You had people wanting to attach their name to security businesses. You had people wanting to get them involved in disputes over money. And I just found the whole thing, becoming a bit of a mess and it was becoming too time consuming. And by this stage, I'm doing the door. I was doing 36 hours a week on the door in Newcastle. And it was at that period as well, I decided to start writing some notes down about my involvement with the Krays. And I thought, this is when I'm going to try and write a book, because no one's ever done one about these people in prison. And that was it. 95, 96, I started putting the book together and started writing it. And I hand wrote it. I've still got the actual manuscript. I hand wrote the whole thing. And then I tightened it up. And then obviously, got in touch with a guy who was kind enough to help us with it, to help me put it together. And then, we printed it. So the Krays, the Geordie Connection was my very first book, which came out in 2003. At
Ronnie's funeral, I remember you mentioned, and just seeing how the people that were out sweeping the streets would stop and wait and doff their cap as the funeral passed. And it really kind of brought home how much they were revered in the East End of London and how much they were respected. And they still had the appeal. It's just amazing that even here in 2022, we're sitting down doing a podcast about them. There were 2 convicted murderers, fair enough, but they definitely had a wider appeal that has lasted through the ages, haven't they? And why do you think that was or is?
Yeah, it's bizarre. It was the Bow flyover. I remember going over the Bow flyover, which was getting some major reconstruction at the time. And I was in the cortege of cars. I think it was something like 18 cars in the cortege. I was with Charlie in car number 8. And I remember going over the Bow flyover, and the workmen had stopped working, and they took off their yellow hard hats, and they're standing with them on their chest. And I was like, this is bizarre. This is for a murderer. And we've got a turnout akin to the funeral of Winston Churchill. And that was just mind-blowing. I think it's because they've become part of London's culture and the swinging 60s. You probably point back to David Bailey's photographs being the main reason why they've stood the test of time. He did a book called Magic Box, which was a book of photographs of people of that particular era. So in there you had the Rolling Stones, you had Mick Jagger and co, you had the Beatles, you had Lulu, and you had the Krays, and they were all cased in this photographic book. And then, of course, Bailey went on to photograph Reggie and Francis at the wedding, because Bailey was a socialite, and those images of the Krays is what has made them stand the test of time, and they're forever known as Britain's only gangsters, only gangsters, and it was because they courted publicity. The photographs of them with the Rocky Marcianos, the Rocky Gracianos, the Sonny Listons, the Joe Louis, and the Barbara Windsors, and the Judy Garlands. All of those photographs are what really kept that ticking and kept it going alive. And the scandal with Lord Boothby, I mean, that Ronnie Kray dared to get into the Houses of Parliament, get a Lord to speak up for them in the Houses of Parliament, but then also to be photographed at Boothby's house and, to try and sell a business idea to him and ultimately end up having sexual relations with him. That is what really made these brothers very, very distinguishable and a story long lived. And, that's the reason they didn't get released. Not only was Ronnie Kray sleeping with Lord Boothby, but he was sleeping with Tom Dryburgh, who was Labour MP. So he had both sides of the house, in controversy. And the profession for violence is again something which makes them well known. Ronnie Kray walking in, well known in the East End of London, walking into an East London pub and shooting somebody in cold blood and walking out expecting to get away with it. It's madness. But the fact as well that they were both they're identical twins. It could have been such a different story if they'd just stuck to boxing. They could have been as revered as the Cooper brothers, in boxing, but they chose to go down the path that they chose, and the rest is history, shall we say.
You mentioned about Lord Boothby there. There was a theory that there's a lot of high people in high positions that were photographed in compromising positions by the Krays, but that turned out to be the rock that they perished on.
Yeah.
The photographs disappearing. Maybe tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, the photographs certainly were genuine. I mean, Ron in Cedra Court, where him and Reg were both finally arrested in '68. He had his flat done up, and he used to call it the Blue Lagoon. And all kinds of sordid activity went on in there, but a lot of it was filmed, a lot of it was photographed, and those photographs were kept for a rainy day. And this was like a blackmail that they would easily be able to carry out on any politician. But the photographs basically met a rather unfortunate end for the Krays, but a fortunate end for the government, because when the Krays were arrested in '68, those photographs were kept in a place where only a certain few people knew, one of them being Charlie Kray. And Charlie, on a phone call back to his wife, Dolly, basically told him to get rid of the photographs. Now, when he said get rid, he meant get rid as in move them to another location. She took them literally and she set fire to them. So everything that the Krays had on all of these powerful people went up in flames. And when the twins heard that, they weren't very happy with Charlie, certainly weren't very happy with Dolly, but they knew that their chance of freedom had gone up in flames as well.
It was their main bargaining chip just removed. Like, that probably explains why they got as long a sentence as they did. As Reggie said, if I'd murdered Mother Teresa, I would have got a lesser prison sentence,
There's no doubt about it. And I mean, on visits I spoke to Reg about the fact that he would never show remorse. On more than one occasion, something had been in the newspapers when I was visiting. I mean, I remember one day Tony Lambriani would put a story in the paper suggesting that he knew where Jack the Hat was buried. And there was a photograph on the front page of the Daily Mirror or the Sunday Mirror where Tony's standing at a graveyard and then basically saying that Jack the Hat was buried in this graveyard behind him. And this was about 6 weeks before Reg's parole. So Tony wasn't to know that. Tony was thinking of himself and getting an earner, but Reg was foreman. And that visit was predominantly about everything, And I said to him, well, why don't you ever show any remorse for killing Jack the Hat? And he said, well, it was either him or me. He said, he wanted to kill me. He'd made it quite clear that he wanted to kill me and run. And he'd come down to the club, the Double R club, and he'd fired off a shotgun. He was killing us. And my perspective, I got him before he got, and it's as simple as that. And I'm not sorry that I killed him. So you were never going to get any remorse. Had he shown remorse, would he have got out? He had a better chance. If he'd come forward and said I killed him, and I regret doing it because of what it's cost me, then maybe there would have been a little bit more likelihood of him coming out. But in the grand scheme of things, because of all the political shenanigans and because of the stuff that they had on politicians, I just don't think it would ever have. I just don't think it ever would have happened. And of course, he got a compassionate release when he was diagnosed with terminal cancer, which I guess was better than nothing. In one way, probably felt as if he'd been beaten the system. But what a waste of a life, and what a waste of two lives.
Just you mentioned the difference between Raleigh and Reggie. I'd say Raleigh wore his heart on his sleeve a bit more. He did things by emotion a lot more, whereas Reggie was a bit more calculating and more kind of strategized in his projects and stuff. Would that be fair to say? Like he'd be more conniving, for want of a better word.
Reg was just very manipulative, and certainly, that tape that I've got of him on that particular day shows that, the manipulation of him, of a young person. But with Ron, look, Ron was heavily medicated. Back in the 60s, he took Stematol for paranoid schizophrenia. Obviously, the medication changed as time moved on and taking different types of medication. But Ron was heavily medicated, and that's the bottom line. He always appeared to be the more saner of the two because of the medication, I think. But look, we had great times with Reg. I had some great calls, some great visits, and the best visit I went on ever was a Christmas visit. It was called a family day. I've still got the letter to this day, and I was invited down to the prison on the 23rd of December to spend a day with Reg. Now, due to train connections, I didn't get there until, I was about an hour late, but it was from 10 o'clock in the morning till 4 in the afternoon, and you got to have your Christmas dinner and, spend time. You could give gifts, and Reg gave us a load of stuff. There was stuff that he clearly got off the wing off people. I remember I got a Naf pencil case, a Naf T-shirt, because Naf was the big thing at the time. I got a cowbell. I've still got this cowbell. Why I got a cowbell, I don't know. But these are the kind of things that he managed to obtain, I guess, swapping stuff on the wing, And it was an interesting day. I spent it actually with another guy who had been in prison with him, who I've got to be honest, I didn't particularly like. Paul Marcus Henry was his name, but. Reg had introduced us to him in Nottingham prison when he was in jail with him, actually. And we didn't hit it off straight away because he came up to us on the visit and he went, "Oh, this is my friend, Paul. He's a good burglar." And I just turned straight away to him and I said, "Well, if he's a good burglar, what's he doing in here?" Which is, straight away was me opening gambit. I'm not a fan of burglars, to be honest, in the first place, but it was the first thing that came to my mind, and me and Paul just never seen eye to eye after that. I subsequently caught him at a charity do, nicking money out of the take-ins, and we had an altercation, and he had a pop at me, but I got to him first, shall we say. So, and this is when we were young and dumb and full of what, and it was just, I just didn't like the kid. So I ended up having to spend a day with him on this particular visit, and the atmosphere, you could have cut it with a knife at the start, but Reg was saying, "Oh, just put your differences to one side. Let's sleep in dog's line. Let's just get on with it." So we did, but we went our separate ways outside, and I'm glad to see I'd never seen him again. But it was just good, spending a Christmas day with him, and like a Christmas day, as in his Christmas day with him, and having that opportunity to chat about various things. And he's, he was somebody who. Did I miss him when he passed away? Well, our relationship had died off by the time he died. And I had the opportunity to go and visit him in the hotel when he was a free man. And I decided not to go because I just felt that I wanted to remember Reg how I remembered him. I didn't want to see this frail old man lying in bed with tubes in him, ready to die. And that's basically where I would have been at if I'd gone. So I wrote him a letter, and I know he got it because Roberta, his wife at the time, made sure it was passed on. So I know that he got my final message. And yeah, it was a strange end to it, because I was a minder at Ronnie's funeral. At Charlie's funeral, I went as a mourner, but at Reg's funeral, I just went as a bystander, and I walked. There's a photograph actually, which was in the East London Advertiser, which I've still got, where when he left the church, no, he left English's funeral parlour. I'm walking down Bethnal Green Road, and I'm just alongside the hearse with a coffin in, and I just had a dark coat on, pair of jeans, a pair of trainers, and a pair of sunglasses. And I'm literally just looking at the coffin, and I'd gone on the full circle. I'd gone on the full journey. That was me. That was the end of the 10-year journey with the Krays for me. And it had gone full circle from somebody who was on the outside, reading a book and looking in, reading the book, walking through it, meeting all the major characters, and then coming out the other side and saying farewell to Reg as he's laid to rest. So, I didn't go up to the crematorium, the cemetery that day either. I left it at there. I went to the church. I watched the whole scenario at the church, and then that was it. And did I think I'd still be talking about it in 2022? Yeah, because I've made a point of keeping the Kray flame alive, and doing it for the same reasons that Ron and Reg did, which is to make money. Of course, it's a story people enjoy. It's a story that I'm sure some of your viewers will enjoy, but it's also something which I've had some amazing journeys with it as well. Somebody approached me to do me Kray's Geordie Connection documentary 22 years ago, which I did. I've now done the Kray's Gangsters Behind Bars, which is it charted in the charts just before Christmas, number 29 it went in at. There's still such a thirst and a demand for knowledge and stories about the Krays. I was a consultant on a film about the Krays, which I never thought I would do. I've been on numerous documentaries. So as time passes and some of the older school have passed on, I've become what you would probably say a Kray expert, and I'm in contact with still of the remaining people, the likes of Freddie Foreman, still in touch with him, still speak to Dave Courtney, still speak to Maureen Flanagan. There are still some of the old school left, but they're few and far between now.
You also played a role in Kray's Dead Men Walking as well, which was nice as one of your acting. That must have been nice for you.
It was nice, and I was a consultant on that film. Richard, John Taylor, the director, and me got on really well. I was asked to go in and do the consultation on the film, but also to help the characters. The actors get into character, and I got on really well with with the guys who were playing Ronnie and Reggie in that film. The girl who played Frances, Triana, who's become a good friend of mine, was really interested in the story and how to prepare for the part. And for me, I was never around in the 60s, so I never got to meet Frances, but I'd spent so much time with Reg and Ron and got to know their feelings, and Charlie, of course, on these people, that that it was better for them to be able to speak to me and get an indication of how to play the part. So that was great. And yeah, I had a nice little cameo at the end where Frank Mitchell is getting led into the back of a van, and it's me who does it. So it's one of those blink if you miss it moments, but it was nice to get it as a credit. But there was nothing better than sitting in the cinema at the premiere and seeing, the opening gambit was a film directed by Richard John Taylor, and then the second person on the screen was consultant Steve Wraith, and I was like, wow, that was mind blowing for me. I never thought I'd see my name up in lights at the start of a film like that, but yeah, it was great. So it was another nice thing, and I it's just nice to be invited onto stuff. There was a podcast made in 2021 by Michael Caine, of all people, one of my favorite actors, of course, in Get Carter, and I was asked to pre-record my interview, but then as I listened to the podcast last year, Michael Caine actually saying my name on this podcast was bizarre. So there's, it's a journey that I'm still on in a lot of ways, and it's one that I'm always quite happy to share an interview.
I remember in the book, just an example of how they thought the world revolved around them. There was one time you were driving down to visit Ronnie and you were in a pretty bad car crash. Maybe tell us what happened that day and his reaction to it.
Yeah, I mean, I got the option on occasions of taking different people on visits, and one of my mates, Matty, was a big true crime fan and very interested in the Krays. And he'd read all the books, and he said, "Do you think I'd be all right to come on a visit?" So Ron had said, "Yeah, bring him down." So Matty said, "Well, instead of getting a train, why don't we hire a car?" So we hired a car from a place called Hutton Hire in Newcastle, and it was a Cosworth, Sierra Cosworth back in the day. And as we're coming down towards Micklefield towards like Leeds way, another Cosworth comes screeching down the outside lane. Now, in front of us, there was an articulated lorry, must have been probably about 400 yards ahead. And as this car screeches past us, it hits the central reservation, and we just see smoke. And we were doing about 80 miles an hour. So my mate Matty just puts the brakes on, keeps his hands on the top of the steering wheel. And as the smoke clears, the articulated lorry that was 400 yards ahead is now right in front of us. And we clipped the back of it. We spun in the air. We hit the central reservation. And then we spun 2 times and we landed on the roof facing oncoming traffic on the other side of the road. Luckily for us, it was 6:45 in the morning because we set off early to go on the visit. Nothing hit us. And I got out of the car with a little cut in the top of my suit. Matty got out of the driver's seat with a little cut on his finger. Unbelievable. Somebody was watching over us that day. We got on the embankment, out of the way of oncoming traffic. Police arrived, ambulance arrived, pickup truck arrived. The car was a write-off. I'd brought a camera, luckily, and I photographed the car. And then at this time I had a mobile. I rang Broadmoor Hospital and told them that I wasn't going to be able to make it because of the accident, and could they pass that on to Ronnie Kray. I then passed that message on to numerous other people within the Kray circle at the time, because I thought I didn't trust them to get the message across. And I was right to do that, because a couple of days later I got a letter in handwriting which had been gone over on numerous occasions, a proper scroll. "I am very angry and very disappointed. You have let me down." Ron basically had been allowed, not told about me being in an accident, and had been taken onto the visit and made to sit in the visiting room for an hour without me and nobody there. Terrible to treat anybody like that, no matter who they are. And luckily I'd taken those photographs, so I had them developed immediately. Sent a letter back to Ron with a photograph of the car in. And within 2 days, I had an apology. I don't think anybody's got an apology off Ron Kray, but I did. And within another 2 days, I had £400 to pay for the car. £200 check off Kray and a £200 check off Laurie O'Leary, who was Ronnie's good friend. And he paid for the car. And me and Ron had a visit a couple of weeks later with Matty. So yeah, there was the plus side and the negative side, but yeah, amazing.
I was under the impression that he knew you were in a car crash and still he got pissed off. So sorry, he obviously didn't get the message passed on to him. So that's fair enough. Like, I think you kind of summed up the Krays at the end of your book. You were saying that if they were around now, they'd probably be more interested in what their cut from the book was, as opposed to how great a story or how you told their story. It kind of sums them up. Really, they were very commercially driven, weren't they? Like, it was all about the money.
They made more money in prison than they did on the outside. Bearing in mind how long they were in there. And it really was because of the a good friend of mine, Ray Burtis, obviously worked with Dominic Lanciano and produced the very first Krays film in 1990, which is still the best film. Actually, on my podcast channel, I've just interviewed Ray about that, and he's given us some great insight into his visits to the Krays. But yeah, that really generated a whole new legion of fans, people who were interested in them. I mean, Reg at one point was getting 400 letters a week of people who were interested in writing to him, and it just escalated. And that was at the time when I was starting to do the T-shirts. And, I created a database. My dad had just gone into computing, and I actually created a database. And when he was getting phone numbers and addresses, we were adding them to a database, which was a pretty new thing at the time. And, you know, it made things so much easier to send things out, to send leaflets out for events, etc. But yeah, I mean, they were motivated by money. They liked making money, but they liked spending it as well. As, you know, the financial records show, when they died with nothing in their accounts, more or less. And you know, you know, there was unpaid bills on the funerals, which came as no surprise to anybody. So Ron had a lot of interest in young boys and young men, and you know, he would often send a watch to somebody who he liked. I'm glad to say I never got a watch, probably because I knocked him back on the cruise. But he, you know, it was like, you know, he was just extravagant beyond belief, and you know, sending money out to this cause and that cause. And as it shows with a car accident that I had, you know, Ronnie Kray sent me, you know, £400 from his personal accounts that were held by other people, as a way of saying, you know, there you go. I hope that helps and covers things. So it tells you where you're at. I mean, they weren't particularly bright on deals as well. I mean, you know, when they did the film deal with Ray Burtis, you know, they both signed contracts for £85,000, you know, to come to both of them, but they didn't have the nous to sign a deal for the video deal, which of course Charlie did. And again, they fell out with Charlie over the film deal, because Charlie ended up scoring not only for his 85 grand, but he got the video deal as well. And it's, you know, they were never particularly bright in that department, but they knew how to make money. Their image made money. And the Kray name continues to make a lot of money to this day. I mean, you're hedging towards 85 books written on the Krays now, since 1969, and that's bizarre.
And you've done 5 of those,
yeah,
which we're going to put the links for as well in the video description. And Steve's got a website, badboysbooks.net, so we're going to put that in as well for all the other books that he's written. I was just thinking there that Ronnie, to come out as bisexual in the 1960s, that was a pace-setting move. Like, not many people would have been openly, especially in the underworld, like I would have said. So that was maybe another example of how maybe their appeal, because they really did set a precedent in things, didn't they? Like, you know, and that being one of them.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. I mean, I guess mental illness comes into it. I mean, he was a paranoid schizophrenic as well, and that would have, you know, and the amount of drugs that he was on and taking, the stematol should never have been mixed with alcohol, yet he would always take his drugs and mix it with alcohol. I think that would have had an effect. But yeah, I mean, look, he was open about his sexuality, which is bizarre in those times. And I mean, you know, the rumors about George Cornell calling him, you know, a fat puff, you know, which led to his death, you know, certainly gets backed up by many of those underworld figures who I've met over the years. They've always said that did happen. There was an altercation, and there was an exchange of words where Cornell said that, you know, but, you know, the underlying issue and the reason that the shooting took place was not really to do with that, but it was the fact that the Richardsons had come onto Kray territory and they had the Battle of Mr. Smith's, where, you know, a relation to the Krays had been, you know, killed at that particular set too. So, you know, it probably had a little bit to do with the fat puff line, but yeah, you know, brave. You know, there was lots of people who were going through the same turmoil. Ronnie Kray coming out as gay in those times. You know, again, you could say it was brave, but I think his mental state would have had a lot to do with why he did that. In
Ireland in the 60s, it would have been illegal to come out as homosexual. I'm not sure what it was like in the UK. I suppose Ireland kind of
it was
the country, but
it wasn't illegal, but it was frowned upon. Yeah, and it wasn't. You know, you'd be ostracized from you know, from your friends group or public. And back in those days, it was very, very difficult for anybody to come out and admit their sexuality in those days.
I think it's fair to say, Steve, that neither Ronnie or Reggie would have been too impressed with the Legend movie, the way they were portrayed in it. But how did they find the original movie with the Kemp brothers in 1990? What was their opinion on that?
They didn't like that either. They didn't like it either. The reason they didn't like it was because Billy Whitelaw, who I thought did a great job as playing Violet Kray, swore in the movie. And that was the one thing that they didn't like at all. The mother never swore, so they say. I'm not sure whether she did or not, but that really horrified them. But I think the public reaction, which they saw clearly in the amount of mail that they got afterwards, clearly, you know, pleased them. And they got over it, but their initial reaction was that. And I mean, Ron said he didn't like it because of that. And he told Ray Burtis face to face that he didn't like it because of that. Reg, to a degree, enjoyed it. I think he just liked the fact that it was the notoriety, and you know, it kept the Kray flame alive. You know, it kept the Kray name alive, and in fact, it jettisoned it on a whole new line because of books and T-shirts and documentaries, and you know, it put them on a pedestal again, and it introduced the Krays to a new generation. So I think Reg saw the bonus of it, and so the power of it, and it immortalized them, which is really what it was all about. You know, they wanted to be immortalized, and the film did that.
I've been to Newcastle once myself, and I love the place. I really enjoyed it, and I'm hoping to come back over again next month. The Krays also like Newcastle, Raleigh and Reggie. Could you maybe just summarise, I know you've written a book on this, but just maybe just sum up briefly the connection they had with the city of Newcastle?
Yeah, I mean, look, the Krays were certainly looking to branch out, not just in Newcastle, but all over the country. And they used the nightclub and casino circuit when in its infancy to try and do that. They were tied with Sam Lederman, who had a contact, you know, in America as part of the American Mafia. And, you know, they were trying to do work with the Krays in London. Gambling was in its infancy. The roulette machines and the gambling machines, the cash machines were coming into existence. And Newcastle was way ahead of London in that time with bringing in the one-armed bandits, if you like. And the Krays wanted a piece of the action. They had numerous friends in the Northeast. They knew a guy called Panda Anderson. They knew another guy called Davy Finley. They knew Marcus. They knew the Lavaglios, and they knew a guy called Dennis Stafford. Stafford was somebody who'd actually made a statement against them as a youngster when he was attacked by them. There was a big fight when the twins were 17. Stafford made a statement against them. It went to court, but then he basically had amnesia in the dock. At that particular case, he was actually called Siegenberg, but changed his name to Dennis Stafford and moved eventually to the Northeast. He was subsequently tried and found guilty of the murder of Angus Sibbett in the 60s and served a 12-year sentence before coming out. But the Krays visits to Newcastle, there's rumours of them visiting Manchester, Liverpool, Birmingham. There's no pictures of them in those areas, but there are photographs of them in Newcastle, and they were here on 3 occasions. The rumours of them coming to Newcastle and being chased out of town is fabrication and lies. They came up to Newcastle on the first occasion and were greeted wholeheartedly and were entertained by people in the Northeast. The reason that they came to the Northeast was that one of the firm members, a young guy called Mickey Fawcett, who subsequently brought out a book about his life and time with the Krays. Mickey Fawcett was on a visit to Durham jail, and as he was coming out of the visiting room, he bumped into a guy called Frankie Sayers, who was related to the Sayers family in Newcastle, who I've written books about. Frankie Sayers had then said, if you're staying up, come and have a drink with us tonight. We're in the Dolce Vita Club in Newcastle. So Mickey did just that, and Mickey was blown away by the Dolce because it was like Las Vegas on Tyneside. It had great acts on, it had great gambling, and he went back down to London and told the twins about it. And the twins came back to Newcastle, and they came to Newcastle with Mickey, with Eric Mason, with a couple of the other trusted lieutenants, and they had a great night. And that was it. On occasions, they came up separately. Over the next couple of years, there's photographs of Ron and his boyfriend at the time on a US frigate in Newcastle, which is referenced in Ronnie's book. There's also a photograph of them sitting together in the Dolce Vita Club on the night that Sonny Liston was in Newcastle, who was doing an after dinner event. I've also seen, which is available at Middlesbrough University, I've also seen the footage of that event with Joe Louis in Tyneside, who went to the Dolce Vita that night. And if you pause the actual video footage, you can see Ronnie Kray in the front row clapping as Joe Louis comes off stage. So, I mean, the evidence is there for us all to see. The Krays were up here on more than one occasion. they weren't planning on taking over Newcastle. They were planning on working with people in Newcastle. And there's a few little things which stand out as well. I mean, when the Krays went to trial in '69, they actually thanked, in the profession of violence, they actually thanked Marcus Levy, who was the club owner at the Dolce Vita, for donating £5,000 towards their legal expenses. Now, £5,000 back in the 1960s, I mean, you're talking 50 grand. That's a hell of a lot of money for a club owner to donate. Why did he donate it? Who knows? I did get to meet him. I went to Marcus's house. He's passed away since, but I did ask him about it, and even then he wouldn't talk. He said the Krays still have contacts, and I was like, the Krays are dead, and he was frightened. He was very frightened. So what happened? We'll never get to the bottom of that, unfortunately. But the Krays were never driven out of Newcastle. They had many friends in the Northeast. There was business to be done. There was money made at various points, and it's a piece of history that.
You were very fond of their brother Charlie as well. You got on very well with him. He seemed like a good character from the book.
Yeah, Charlie was great. I mean, look, Charlie was the elder brother. He was like a wicked uncle. He opened the doors for me in London. He introduced me to the likes of Freddie Foreman, Frankie Fraser, Charlie Richardson. He introduced me to London nightclubs and night scenes, and we had some great night outs down there. As I mentioned earlier, he came to Newcastle to support my charity events. He had a really sad ending though, because he, ultimately was set up by the police in a drug sting. Essentially, it was a £78 million cocaine deal, as it was reported in the press. Charlie, when he was arrested, didn't have any drugs at the house. There wasn't any drugs on his person. There was no evidence of him giving the drugs or arranging the drug deals. It was literally, he was convicted on the fact that he was caught on an undercover police operative tape, and in Newcastle of all places, saying that he could provide the contact with this person, and he got the biggest sentence. He was classed as the organizer, but he was actually, the undercover police were put into him. They asked him if he could do this. He said yes. But if you'd asked Charlie if he could source a bike, he would know somebody who could get you a bike. If you said, do you know if you can get 200 cigarettes, he'd know somebody who could do that. But he ended up getting 12 years and 8 years to run concurrently. He got a life sentence. I was asked to be a character witness for him, which I was only too happy to do. I actually went to court for Charlie Kray, stood in the dock, and was a character witness for him, which he was thankful for. But he didn't stand much of a chance, because Frankie Fraser, God bless him, was another character witness. And as Frankie Fraser came out of the court, he turned to the judge and went, "Thank you, Your Honour. That's the first time I've left court a free man," which the jury found hilarious, but it just didn't benefit Charlie on the day. And as I say, he ended up with a life sentence. And I visited him a couple of times in prison, and when he was in Franklin prison in the Northeast, I was looking after his family when they came up, and I would make sure that they got to the prison, etc. And the Sayers brothers in Newcastle were actually in Franklin prison that time, and they looked after him, which he was forever thankful for. But yeah, an amazing guy. Got to know him very well, and just a tragic end for him. Really, he was convicted because his name was Kray, and I still say to this day, because Reg was due to get released, that they needed to create a stir, and I think Charlie was locked up because it would create a bad image on the Kray's name once again, and would make Reg's parole a no-no.
Yeah, the movie probably didn't help either at the time when the parole date was coming up.
Glorification of crime is never a good thing when someone's life, depends on it, and Reg's life depended on it with a release, and he didn't get it.
They died within 6 months of each other as well, didn't they? In the year 2000, like Charlie died in April and Reg died in October. So were they on good terms? They were on good terms. Yeah, and I mean, when Charlie was moved from Franklin to the Isle of Wight to Parkhurst, that finished him off. And within a few months, he'd taken ill. His legs had swelled up. He didn't have any movement.
He was in a chair, he was in a wheelchair, and Reg was given compassionate release to go and visit him in prison. And he was taken over to the Isle of Wight, and he visited them, and they got on. They were friendly, they were on good terms, and it killed Reg that. And then, of course, within a few months, he was diagnosed with cancer himself and passed away as well.
You mentioned in the book that you were friendly with the governor, Lenny Mclean, and the first guest on my podcast was Jake Abraham from Lock, Stock and Two Smoking Barrels, and he actually shared a caravan with Lenny Mclean on set of Lock, Stock, and he had some brilliant stories of being around him. So I think Jake would be a good guest for you as well to have at some point. But how did you get on with Lenny yourself? You're quite friendly with him?
Yeah, I mean, Lenny Mclean was a fascinating character. I only got to meet him a couple of times. I got to meet him at a place called The Governors in London, and it was the wake of Ronnie Kray, and we spent a bit of time talking about the fights against Roy Shaw, and I just found him, he was a colossus, really. I mean, his hands were like that. His two hands, my two hands were like one of his. But he was like a gentle giant, very deep voice, very well spoken, and just, you could tell though, you wouldn't want to have a row with him. And even me as a doorman, you would think, how on earth do I tackle somebody like this if he comes swinging at you? He was like the Hulk. Subsequently, I met Roy Shaw, and Roy was a lot smaller, thick set, but a lot smaller. And I looked at Roy and I felt I could have dealt with him, but you couldn't have dealt with Lenny Mclean. I don't mean dealt as in I could have had a fight with him. I just meant at least you wouldn't, you could try and have a roll around with him, but Lenny Mclean, you're just looking, you're beaten before you start. And I often wonder how those two ever fought, because it was just like David and Goliath in many ways. But yeah, I got on very well with Lenny. I mean, he had some great stories, and as I say, I only met him a couple of times, but it was again another gangland figure, another legend, if you like, who I had the pleasure of meeting. Roy Shaw, often a bit more dangerous. I often felt a bit more dangerous. It was in his eyes, you know what I mean? He had black piercing eyes, very like Ronnie Kray's, and you just wouldn't have crossed him. But two legends in the unlicensed boxing scene, which of course I went on to get involved in years later.
In my current job, I worked with a man from London called Don, and he was a bouncer in the Historia nightclub in London, and Lenny was the head bouncer. And literally, he was saying you really had to tone down the workplace banter with Lenny, like, you couldn't really take the piss.
Oh, bet.
He'd eat you. You had your own experience, Steve, as a doorman in Newcastle. You were there for 18 years.
Yeah.
I loved hearing the story about how you actually got into bouncing.
Yeah, I mean, that was a strange one, because I used to go out with my mates in Newcastle socialising, and, my mates would end up fighting, usually with each other, sometimes with other people, but I would end up jumping in and stopping them. And the bar that I used to go in at the start of the night and the end of the night was a place called Masters. And the head doorman, Gary, came up to us one day and said, Steve, he says, you don't fancy doing the door, do you, over Christmas? And I went, me, you're joking? And he went, no. He says, I'd love you to come and work for us over Christmas. He says, one of the doormans off with a broken arm would love you to be able to come and work. And I went, yeah, go on then. That's fine by me. And that was it. I went down on the Thursday night, got there at 7:00, got shown around the venue. The manager says, can you come back a bit later, because there's nobody in. So I went off and had a pint, and then another pint, and then another pint with Gary, the head doorman, Guinness of all things. 6 pints later, I went back. I was half cut, got to the venue, and I never drank again before a shift or on a shift, because I was like backwards and forwards to the toilet. It was just a nightmare. But that first night, I loved it. I was young, I was free, I was single, I was fit lad. And you either sink or swim on the door job, and I just swam straight away. There was bother, I was straight in. I was getting somebody out, talking to people, chatting to people. Newcastle players were coming in the side fire door, and they were tipping us for letting them in, so they didn't have to stand in the queue. And I just took to it like a duck to water. So it was a job which I thought I would only be doing for 5 minutes. Over the Christmas period, I made good money. I was on £25 an hour. and I was doing Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. But then when it came to January, I was, last in, first out. So I found myself without a job, and I thought, I love this. I don't want this to be the end. I can't wait till next Christmas in case Masters have, want to like rehire us or whatever. So I ended up going to do looking for another job, and I was lucky to get a head doorman's job straight away. I got a place at a bar called the Filament in Firkin, which was next door to a bar called Scruffy Murphy's, a proper Irish themed pub. And I ended up working there as a head doorman, me and this other guy, and that was the start of it. And yeah, I went on and did 18 years. I worked in Newcastle, I worked in London, and I worked in Ibiza. And I branched from the door work into close protection work. So I was then looking after celebrities, etc., who were coming to the Northeast. I did a few of those jobs in London, but it was something I thoroughly enjoyed. It's a young man's game, definitely, but it's a game which you either sink or swim. And I'm just very lucky that I swam. And I used that job to network. I used it to network. I always had a business card on me, and I always handed out my business card to different people. And some of the high profile people that you look after would then pass on your details to the next high profile person. That's how it used to work. And, I was just very lucky in that respect, but it was a job I really enjoyed, It's a book I've never written. Maybe I will one day, but I've touched on my door career in certain books, but never expanded on it. And it's one I might write at some point.
I remember on your first night or second night, there was a form that came back to confront all the bouncers at the door because they were kicked out the night before. It was quite scary.
Yeah, I mean, that was an interesting one at Masters, because there was a big set to with Gary on the front door with a couple of lads from Gateshead who'd been thrown out the bar, they'd been chucked out, and then they said they were going to come back. And as I was leaving that night, the guys turned round and we had a bottle of beer at the end of the night, and they said, you want to maybe bring a tool tomorrow night, like? And I was like, a tool? And they were like, yeah, gonna have bother tomorrow night. And I was like, a tool? Are these being serious? I got there the next night, and sure enough, the lads had koshers, knuckle dusters, you name it, they were tooled up. I wasn't, and I thought they were taking the mick, to be honest. It's a bit like when you start your new job, somebody sends you for tartan paint, or they send you for a long walk off a short pier. And you're like, daft little things like that, but no, they were being deadly serious. So anyway, these guys did come back, and they were mob-handed. So I learned a lot about teamwork that night, because we're all standing on the front door, all on one side of the road. We're defending the bar, and on the other side of the road, there are all of these kids gesticulating and come on then, blah, blah, blah. But then, in the good old days in Newcastle, there was a radio between the bars, and we made a call. Gary made the call up to the big market, and before you knew it, it was like the charge of the light brigade, and the 4 bars that we were connected with in the big market, all the doormen came down from there, and there was a free for all outside the bar. And the police arrived. The customers were nicked, and we never had any trouble with them again. But it was a hell of an experience in your first few days as a doorman.
It makes sense that you're quite good at conflict resolution, because I've seen you on group calls on your own show where guests have been getting a bit leery with each other and stuff, and I think that it stood you in good stead for the podcasting game.
Yeah, I'd much rather do it like this than face to face. I've got to be honest. Like it can be a nightmare. And yeah, I guess I'm a people person. I worked in a post office. I dealt with people from all walks of life. Giving them their money. Letting them pay their bills. And then gradually moving into the door work and dealing with people face to face like that. And then moving into events and stuff, you're dealing with the general public. So it's something which I've done on a regular basis. And I think, you just got to learn how to speak to people. And I think speaking to people, and going back to the start of the interview, about learning to read and write and add up and speak properly, which is what my parents encouraged, by giving us, to put us in for elocution lessons, etc. My parents did the best for me, and I'll always be eternally grateful for that.
Moving on from the Krays that opened other doors for you in true crime, and you managed to write a book for Paul Ferris, the wee man.
Yeah, Paul was Paul was an interesting character. I mean, to be honest, I had a former business partner who was really, really, really interested in writing a book with Paul, and it wasn't something that I'd actually looked at doing. But then, you know, the introduction came through a good friend of mine called Brian Anderson, who had recently done a book called Faces, a photographic walk through gangland. And Paul was good friends with Brian. He introduced me, and he said, look, you know, if you fancy doing something with Paul, you know, I can, you know, open those particular doors. And that's what happened. It started with me writing for Front magazine. I was the true crime writer for Front magazine when Ian Edmondson was the editor. And I was asked to interview Paul Ferris about the film The Wee Man, which my good friend Ray Burtis had done. And that was what I did. I did an interview with Paul. We recorded it over the phone. I typed the interview up, and then I subsequently sent him a copy of the magazine. And he just got back to me. He rang us up and he said, Steve, I just want to thank you. He says, it's nice to see somebody who says they're going to do something that they're going to do. You know, he says, I gave an interview and it's there word for word. Thanks very much for that. So that was a trust thing. And then I said, look, if I'm ever up in Glasgow, I'll give Brian a ring and then I'll come and see you. And so that was it. A year later, I was in Glasgow going for a haggis with him. He said, I had to have a haggis on that first visit. He said, because when in Scotland, do what the Scottish do. And that was it. I thoroughly enjoyed it. It was a great meeting. You know, we got on very well. We had a lot of synergy. He'd spent time in Franklin prison with the Sayers family. And obviously I know the Sayers family well. And we, you know, so we had a common interest, a common friend. And we, you know, talked a little bit about all sorts. And then I turned around and said to him, I said, have you ever thought about doing another book? Thinking what my business partner was keen on. And he went, not really. He said, what angle would you come at? And I said, well, to be honest, I said, the books that you did were fantastic. And I said, I don't think you can better what Reg Mackay did. I said, but why not do a tribute to Reg Mackay? And he said, I love it. I love the idea. So that's what we did. We basically took Paul's story and we redid it, and it was difficult. And I've got to say, my ex-business partner did a very good job in piecing things together. I did the interviews, I typed the transcripts up, and then he pieced it together and formulated it into a different way. So it was teamwork, it was synergy between the three of us, but we did a really, really good job on it, I'm pleased to say. And it's a book that stands the test of time. And it's a book now you can pick up before you pick Reg Mackay's books up, and it makes sense. If you read it, it doesn't matter what order you read them in, It makes sense. But if you pick that one up first, you get a good idea of who Paul is, and it sounds as if it's Paul telling the story, which is the key to a good book. But since then, I've had many a meal with Paul. He's been to Newcastle. We've been back up to Scotland, and we've got a really good relationship. He's a top man.
I've listened to the audio version of it. It's an excellent book, so fair play in writing it. And Paul does come across as a very genuine man in the interviews that I've seen him on, the different podcasts, James English and that. And you can tell he doesn't glorify his past either, I think, which is good, like, you know. And
no, 100%, mate. He is a genuine guy. He's a very intelligent guy as well. You find a lot of these former criminals are intelligent people, and if they put their mind or had the opportunity to put their minds into different business situations younger, had that opportunity, they would have gone on to be, very, very successful.
I suppose he did have a very tough time from the family growing up, the Welsh family, being bullied and all that, you know, and I would have a lot of empathy for him for that, like, you know, so.
Oh, 100%, mate. 100%. I mean, you can't, that's the one thing you can't alter as a child, where, your background, your upbringing. I mean, Freddie Foreman, again, a good friend of mine who's, his life as a youngster was traumatized by the Second World War. A lot of these people who lived through the Second World War saw some horrendous things, and the trauma that Fred suffered as a child led to some of the things that happened to him later in his life.
You've also written a poetry book with Charles Salvador / formerly Charles Bronson, which is a bit of a random one. You obviously are very friendly with Charles as well. What's he like in person?
He's an amazing guy. Look, Charlie, with the exception of the 80 days that he's out, he's now into his 47th year as a prisoner in the British prison system, formerly known as Britain's hardest man in prison. But somebody who's turned his life around massively, somebody who was, in one period of time was actually in lockdown, in a cage, being fed through a hatch for 23 years. So mentally, to survive that, he has to be a very unique person. Prior to COVID, I was visiting him every few months, and we have been good friends, and into our 21st year now of being in touch with each other. Again, like all friends, we've had fallouts over certain things and disagreements, but ultimately, I'm always honest with people, especially somebody who's stuck in the predicament that he's in. But we get on very well. He's got a major year ahead of him. He's just been the first person to be awarded a public parole hearing, which is very positive, which means he will now either come out of prison and go to court, and the public will come to the parole hearing, or the public will be allowed in for him to have his parole hearing inside prison. So we're not sure how it's going to work yet, but it is going to happen. That is going to be in September, and then moving forward from there, we're hoping that that he is eventually given his freedom. But it's going to be an interesting time for him. The poetry book came along because, on a visit one day, he said that he had some poetry that he'd like to publish. And I said, well, actually, I wrote a lot of poetry when I was younger. And I said, I've still got it. I said, let me type mine up and let me send it to you, and let's see what you think. So I sent him my poetry. He sent us his. We both read it, and we both thought this could make a great book. And so what we did was we connected the poetry and some of Charles's, wonderful drawings in a book. And it's something I'm proud of. I never thought I would have a poetry book published, but we did, and it's sold very well.
Stephen Sayers, as well, as another man who you've written a book for, and you're going to be playing the role of Stephen in a movie. When will that be released?
Well, look, at the moment the script's been okayed. The script was finalised during COVID. I wrote it. We had somebody who was going to write the script, but then for whatever reason couldn't. So we had a discussion, and I decided to give it a crack myself. As I've already mentioned, I've got good friends in the film industry, the likes of Ray Burtis. I know Ian Lafreniere very well, the guy who created Auf Wiedersehen Pet and The Likely Lads, to name but two, and wrote the scripts for those. So I've been bouncing the idea and the script off those two people. I got feedback from everybody. Ian Lafreniere was a massive help. And ultimately, I've finished up with a 90-page script, which is, I'm very happy with. And the Sayers family are happy with. So that script was okayed in December. It went away to be budgeted. So the 1st of February, we will have the budget complete, and we will know exactly what we need. And then it becomes about raising the finance. We've got a distribution deal signed. So all being well, the finance comes in, we will be in a position to start filming in October this year. So it's exciting in a lot of ways, but we'll not count our chickens. We'll not celebrate until it's the ink is wet on the contract. But at the moment, we're a lot further forward than we thought we'd be with the hold up that COVID provided. But yeah, look, it's good. I mean, it would have been my first lead role, but I've just been cast in a film called Requiem, which I'm filming at the end of February now, which again is with Richard John Taylor, who I worked with on the Craze film. And I'm playing my first lead role in that. So I'm literally waiting for the script to arrive next week, and hopefully I can get my head down and get those lines learned for that film, which I'll be filming in February.
I hope it launches your career, both of them now, and I hope that it opens up more opportunities for you.
Thank you.
When I was above a parkhead a couple of months ago, I heard the Celtic fans chanting, "Who's the Mason in the black?" But today we're speaking to a Mason in black and white. My understanding of Masons, and maybe it's kind of influenced somewhat by the media, but I just think of The Simpsons with the stonecutters.
Yeah,
the scene, the stonecutters. Could you maybe briefly explain what it's like to be a Freemason and what's
Look, Freemasonry is something I got into 9 years ago, and it's something I'm immensely proud of. It certainly changed me for better as a person. There's no financial gain out of it. There's certainly no gain as far as law enforcement is concerned, or favors with the law, or favors with judges. It's ultimately something I did when I was younger. Was a thing called Rotary International, which was a charity organization.
Or referees, for that matter, we should mention.
Or referees, yeah, exactly. But Rotary International, I was in with my dad, my granddad, and me, and there was 3 generations of it in it. And that was like a dinner club on a Tuesday once a month, where we would meet at 12 o'clock We'd all take part in raffles. You know, somebody bring a bottle of whiskey, a bottle of wine, a bottle of this, and you'd pay £2 a strip for your raffle tickets, and all that money goes into the pot for charity. And you know, you do special events like a golf day, or you do a jumble sale or a car boot sale or whatever, and the money goes to charity, local charities. And you've got your butcher, your baker, your candlestick maker sitting around at Rotary International meetings, and you are raising money to put back into the community. And Freemasonry is no different. That is what Freemasonry is about, and that is the Freemasonry that I'm involved in at my level. The only difference between Freemasonry and Rotary International is that you have to pay a fee to be a member. You have to pay an annual subscription to be a member of your lodge. You have to wear your traditional apron, and you get a different apron depending on what level you are at Freemasonry. And you have to do, you have to do your work on the book, the scripture. You sometimes have to learn lines.
Like acting.
Exactly. So for me, it's massively beneficial in that respect. But it's something where you go in and you either enjoy it or you don't. But again, it's your butcher, your baker, your candlestick maker. There's a lot of older people in Freemasonry. My lodge, I'm lucky. There's a lot of younger members coming through, and we've built our lodge up with younger members. Once a month, we do the ceremony. We all have a laugh at anyone who makes a mistake, and then we'll come out and we have a meal together. And it's as simple as that. And we raise money for charity, and we have a raffle. We have a bottle of wine, a bottle of whiskey, and maybe something else. We all put in the raffle. We all do a collection, and then the money goes to local charities. And like for example, December's just been and gone. We make a £500 donation to the Salvation Army, and the Salvation Army go on and buy selection boxes and stuff for kids in the local community who don't get a present at Christmas. It's as simple as that. It's as simple as that. It's a charitable organisation.
I've been at a Mason Hall once in Cork. They opened up the doors of the Masons Hall. It's usually locked, which is nice to look around and see. So give a nice insight. Before we go, Steve, I'd love to have you on some other time to chat about Newcastle and your experiences following Newcastle.
Oh, 100%, mate. Yeah. I mean, it's a different story. It's a different story altogether, but I'll be 100%, mate. I'll be delighted to.
Yeah. But I think it's fair to say that you will have better days in the future as a Newcastle fan than you had yesterday with the FA Cup defeat to Cambridge. But in a word, are you happy with the new owners, and do you think you'll avoid relegation this season?
I'm very happy with the new owners. I think it'll take a long time to get this right. There's been so much, so much abuse by the former owner with this club. He's neglected the ground. He's neglected the training facilities. He's neglected the playing staff. And he's neglected the staff who were already there, who were trying to do a good job. He's just neglected our club, and he's promoted his sports brand globally off the back of our name for 14 years. Rome wasn't built in a day. Newcastle will have better days. The new owners are the right people to do it. And the fact that it's a conglomerate of people, i.e. PIF, Amanda Stavey and PCP, and Jamie Rubin, is a massive positive. We might have to go down to come back. I still think there's life in the old dog yet. The transfer window is a key. We've got to hope that this transfer window, we can bear the fruits of our labour, and we can bring in a striker, which is a necessity, especially after yesterday's performance. And if we can do that, there's still hope. But the end of January and the beginning of February are key. We've got to beat Watford, we've got to beat Leeds, and we've got to beat Everton. And I think if we win those 3 games, I think we'll stay up. I think anything less than 9 points, I think we're going to struggle. But, we could still pull off the great escape. And, like everybody who follows Newcastle United, I'll be a very, very happy man. But I think it's going to go the last week of the season. I think I'll make that statement now. I think it'll go the last week of the season, and then it'll be in the laps of the gods. And don't forget, we've got a big game against Burnley coming up then. It could be a high noon shootout between us and Burnley. Very good.
So, Steve, thanks a million for coming on the show this morning. It's been really appreciated. 2 hours has gone by in a flash, and I could literally spend the day talking to you. So thanks a million for taking time to come on. You obviously are very well known on YouTube, and I'm a new channel myself and hoping to build up. So having you on it's been brilliant, and it's been a great boost to the channel. So thanks very much for your time.
No, thank you, and best wishes to you, mate. Good luck with the podcast. Thank you to you for having us on. Thanks to all your subscribers as well, and good luck and safe passage through 2022 to all of them, and big love to me brothers in Northern and Southern Ireland. I've got a lot of friends out there in different walks of life. A big shout out to them as well. But look forward to coming back on and talking about Newcastle United, and maybe get you on my show as well, mate.
Yeah. Cheers, man. So I'm going to put in the links for your own podcast, True Crime, and for NUFC Matters. If you haven't done so already, guys, please like, subscribe, click the notifications bell so you don't miss any future videos and updates. So thanks once again for joining us, and we'll see you next time on the Parlay with Padre podcast. Good night. God bless.